Welcome back to another episode of the SaaS Buyers Club. I'm your host, Omeed.
And I'm your co-host, Joe.
And this week, we're interviewing Ryan Kulp. Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Thanks, guys.
So, Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit? It sounds like you do a lot, and I love that. So tell us a little bit about, some of the things that you've done and a little bit about you.
Well, I always like to introduce myself as a musician because that's what I think I was born to do. It's unfortunately not what I do to make any money whatsoever or eat or anything like that. But yeah, I fell into technology after school and over the years through rote repetition became a founder and now partner at a MicroPE fund, Fork Equity. I've done a bunch of deals, maybe 12, 15 deals over the past 6-7 years, buying SaaS apps, growing them, and then in some cases, most cases, knock on wood, reselling them to someone else, another fund or another operator who wants to, manage it independently. And throughout this journey of 10 years or so, I've transitioned from being in customer service to being a marketer to being a product guy, to most recently being sort of a developer-ish. I would say I'm more of a prototypist, but being a builder, so day to day, I code, I sell, I shitpost on Twitter. And, I've been very fortunate to be in this tech industry and have so many opportunities to try these different skills out and then pursue music part-time as a hobby.
And to hone in a little bit there on what you're saying. So first of all, yeah, I love your background there. I feel you. Too bad about the music thing, but not everything makes money, especially not the fun things usually.
That's right.
And so a few things I want to hone in on are, though, on your experience buying and selling some businesses or apps, and your experience in relation to that as a founder or operator. And maybe you have some really cool tips there that would make a lot of sense for other founders who are looking to sell their business or don't know what it looks like to sell their business, and so really are trying to get educated on the experience. So those are some subjects that sound like really stand out to me that we should hone in on. What do you think, Omeed? And do you have some direction you want to navigate us initially, Omeed?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've touched a lot of companies. So walk us through those companies.
Sure. Should I talk about jobs or just stuff that I've done as an entrepreneur?
You can just focus on the things that you've done as an entrepreneur.
Cool. Well, it really starts in college doing two different businesses. I sold pinback buttons, that you'd put on your vest or your book bag as a political campaign or like a sports team logo. That taught me about penny margins. Literal penny margins, right? You sell buttons for like 15 cents each and your cost of goods is 12. And I had roommates and buddies coming over at 2 a.m. to do orders on our button making machines and paying them per button and just calculating it all in a spreadsheet and not knowing how to use functions. And that was 2011, 2012, really just where I cut my teeth on getting customers, servicing the customers, delivering or fulfilling orders, dealing with complaints, trying to have more money left over at the end of the week than you started with, managing inventory, all of that. And then that launched into post-school trying to do startups because I was involved a little bit in Atlanta where I went to school with some of the stuff going on downtown with startup incubators and accelerators and hearing about people raising money and hiring teams and making things that are going to make the world a better place, right? And shipping quickly. And I thought I could do that. And so then I moved to New York City, 2013. I get a day job, but I was moonlighting as a founder and I made this marketplace for artists where they could display their work at cafes and venues around town. And I was working exclusively with like the quintessential artiste, starving artist, lives in Brooklyn, paints something, tries to sell it for $5,000. Nobody buys it. They put it under their bed. 4 months later, they throw it away. And this is just like rinse and repeat. This is the life of a lot of these artists. And I wanted to do something about it, even though I know nothing about visual art. And so I did a little friends and family round went door to door and did door to door sales. And that company was called ArtSpot. And I would just go to dozens and dozens of cafes, asking them if we could put holes in their wall and hang art. And, you know, it won't cost you anything, but if someone buys it, you'll get a commission. And we did exhibitions. And I learned a lot about, you know, how little money you can make as a non-famous artist. I learned about door-to-door sales. I didn't know anything about coding, so I had to hire people to code. People would come over and I would have a 6-pack of beer and they would like code for beer. And I guess I learned a little bit about motivating people there, or leadership. Not that I was a good one, but I just sort of learned, like, some people have to pay a lot of money to get someone to write code. But if you're fortunate enough, you can just be a bro and someone will come give you a solid and, you know, build a feature for you, and you order a pizza. And if you divide that out per hour, you're getting like developers in New York City for $1.50 an hour, right? And so that was like my first tech entrepreneur experience. And then fast forward a few years, I was living in San Francisco, working at a venture capital fund. That was my day job at this point. And I was looking into buying companies on the side. And the term MicroPE kind of, I don't know, I'm not going to say it didn't exist. Someone listening to this is going to Google it and say it did exist, whatever. But it wasn't as common as it is now, right? There weren't like .coms that had micro and PE in the name. Let's put it that way. And the person I was dating at the time was in PE, very formalized, you know, multi-billion-dollar fund setting. And so I was familiar with the concepts, familiar with LBO, familiar with, you know, the lingo, and started looking around for apps that were, you know, the 3Ds, right? There's like, what is it? Distress, divorce, death. I don't know. The 3Ds in real estate and PE that people like to talk about. And we sort of found one, and it was a Shopify app. And it was just the person was motivated to get out. Let's put it that way. And so we acquired it. And then that became kind of my life's work for the next 6-7 years. It was an app called Notify that we rebuilt and rebranded to FOMO, and then later became FOMO.com. And I was then founder of that for several years until we exited in 2022. But during those next 5-6 years, I continued dabbling, you know, buying a few more small SaaS apps, starting a couple SaaS apps, selling most of them. I think actually we sold all of them, to be honest, and did another 10 transactions, I think between 2017 to 2022, all in the B2B SaaS space, with low touch conversion tools, you know, stuff that costs $9 to $99 a month, hiring a few developers, having customer support teams, going through all of the motions of a SaaS tool, but with a starting point that someone else founded, right? Because what you're really paying for in PE, or I think MicroPE, is product market fit. I think when PE operations scale, you are paying for, you are paying for a factory, you're paying for contracts, you're paying for all these things that would take literal years to build, even if you had all the capital and resources up front. It just takes time to, quote unquote, build that. Whereas in software, I've always said that SaaS tools, micro, small SaaS tools, and in some cases, even large SaaS operations, are just a few dudes in a room, you know, on their computer. There's no like physical assets. You can get up and move headquarters by just clicking buttons and hiring lawyers to reincorporate you elsewhere. And so in SaaS, what are you really paying for? You're paying for product market fit, because it's really pretty easy to build a product that does X when you click the button. And developers demonstrate this every day. And other developers are building infrastructure that continues to make it even easier to build tools really, really quickly. But in the SaaS space, after you build a few things, you realize that the hard part was never coding. The hard part was always getting customers. And then you go and learn marketing tactics. Then you still realize the hard part wasn't even the marketing tactics and setting up ad campaigns and sending good cold emails with high converting subject line. The hard part was finding something people really want. So product market fit. And that's what we're paying for. And that's what got me into the PE thing, is that there's this cheat code that I keep trying to tell everyone about, to make it less of a cheat code, and try to let people know that you can stop floundering, you know, and wasting your talents building things people don't care about. You can acknowledge that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, AKA the OG founders who have done the toiling part for you. And you can jump in and take that off their hands, give them a win, and then use those skills you have as a builder or as a marketing tactician or whatever, take it to the next level. And then you get you get to clock your win. So that sort of became the framework, you know, and how I perceived all these opportunities over the years and how I became franchised. And then I guess you could say disenfranchised in starting things from scratch, and how I was able to better leverage my quote unquote talents to still get similar outcomes without some of the upfront fail starts that we often see in the founder world.
So I wanna touch on one thing but we'll do this in a minute, which is, okay, there's this cheat code, which I think is really cool that you're talking about. And I want to ask, okay, so what criteria do you use to determine whether or not a product or let's say a SaaS tool up for sale has product market fit? That is something that is obviously has a generally accepted definition, but I want to see, what secret sauce exists behind that cheat code, if anything. Before we get to that, though, I feel like we kind of need to touch base with where we're at, which is we got a good review from you there about sort of like what you've been up to and what you're doing. What are you doing like right now moving forward? Like, is still the same stuff you just talked about, or are you doing something else different now?
Right now, I'm actually parlaying an exit from exits. So I'm thinking about transitioning from, wearing many hats and dedicating just minutes or hours per week to each portfolio project, the life of the PE operator, to instead actually just going deep on one thing and actually putting all my eggs in one basket, not diversifying my investments of my time or effort or interest or whatever, and doing something that can be my next 5 to 10 year venture. So the way that FOMO was, none of the other projects I've worked on have given me the same personal satisfaction as being the founder of FOMO and being so in touch with the product and the customer and the team. And so I'm thinking of, I guess to put it simply, I'm thinking of becoming a technical co-founder to someone else's business side, prowess and vision. And I've done that to a small degree over the last year since we sold FOMO. I've built a few MVPs for people as sort of a consultant. Most recently, I got involved on the founding team of one where it was a mix of cash and equity, which was awesome. And it's a stock options trading tool that I've been hacking on. And that's been really fulfilling and fun to just wake up and have one thing to think about, a few of the same dedicated team members who are in it for the long term. And I just, on a personal level, can't say that this is the financially sound direction to go, but on a personal level, I get a little bit more fulfillment from that. And, with the PE thing, it's like, I'm no expert, but I get it. I get it. You look for things that have problems where the problems aren't insurmountable, that your skills can fill those gaps. You give the original founder a win, you ratchet up all of the things, right? You try to drive more top line, you try to decrease the churn, you try to do improve all these different markers, and then you sell it to the next guy. And it's fun, it's rewarding. But after you do it a few times, I think the average person is going to say, okay, well, what now? And that's sort of where I've been at. But
some people just want to keep, pushing play on the machine and getting the coins to pop out. And then some people similarly like, okay, what else can I do that's exciting or maybe more fulfilling?
Ryan has the cheat code, man. So he's tired. He's tired of playing the game. He's had too many exits. He's ready to exit.
Sounds like
I hope that's not how I came across. No, I hope that's not how it came across. I think
no, it isn't. He's just messing with you. It sounds like you want to get deep on something. Is that right?
Yeah, I want a new challenge, and it is funny that you brought that up. I know you guys are just teasing, but there is a thing I said to a buddy years ago. At the time, I can't even remember exactly what I was doing, but I was working on something and it was going well. And I said to him, we were out at a bar or something, and I said, I think I want to do something else. And he just looked straight ahead at the back wall and he goes, Ryan, figures out how something works, wants to do something else. And he was insulting me, right, as like a friend, like giving me some tough love. Cause I think, you know, another one of my favorite things to say, at least my internal talk is, you know, hey, you find something that works, let's bang the register. That's how I say it, right? There's go back to the well, like there's push play, like what you just mentioned, Joe. I like to say, like, I want to bang the register a few more times. And so I get that perspective. You get a lot of benefit from, you know, getting embedded into a process. And it's sort of very inefficient to say, okay, I think I get it, let me jump on to the next thing. So I don't want to be foolish, but I also think there still has to be a local maximum where you go, okay, I got into the MicroPE thing. I banged the register 15 times. It was really cool. And there's still a lot I can learn, but I think I've 80-20'd it. So it's not about, I get it, I know everything. It's not about that at all. I'm nowhere near that. It's that I've 80-20'd it. And I think I can feel myself at that 79% comprehension. And that's where I'm thinking, you know, I've got to go, because the scale up process of going from being clueless about a topic to being 50% aware is just a lot more fun to me. And I've been doing that with outdoor work. You know, I have a tractor now. I maintain several acres. I do these different things where, am I ever going to be a pro farmer? Absolutely not. Could I ever make more? Even if I did, could I ever make more money farming than writing code? Of course not. But I personally get a lot more satisfaction learning how to fix a tractor than going through the motions of buying a small SaaS. And that's just where I'm at now.
No, I hear you there. And sorry to hog the mic, Omeed. I have a few direct follow-up questions, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I hear you. That makes a lot of sense. And I actually think that's something we should dive into also, in addition to the subject we just referred to earlier about any criteria you might have on for your cheat code. But we should also dive into the subject of, you know, how founders and other people feel. I'm thinking founders here. How founders feel when they come up to that point of, okay, I want to exit, I want to do something else, or they kind of get too much stuck into it and they don't make that decision. And then several more years pass and maybe they don't have that opportunity again. And so there's definitely that conversation about when founders or how founders should think about the timing of their exit and the criteria of that. And I think it's super important because I've seen a lot of technical founders / co-founders who, you know, they're too deep and too in love with the business, and they don't have that mindset at all of like, okay, I need to make a business decision here or a life decision. That's not a technical decision. So I definitely think we should jump into that. Just kind of capping off what you're saying now. So you want to go deep on something, this business 10 to 15 years potentially, and then do you intend on likely exiting that business at such time, or are you trying to build a heritage business for your family? What are you thinking?
I definitely don't care about making something legacy to make it any easier for my future kids. I just think that that's going to make them soft. And, you know, I hope that they watch this one day. I don't even have kids yet. I just know it's all going to happen very, very soon, I think. And, you know, I've met a lot of people who had easy lives thanks to their parents. And I know their parents had the best intentions, but it made them kind of effed up young and adult individuals. And so to me, it's very clear from just empirical evidence to not give my kid too many handouts. So I couldn't care less about like having a family business, having a legacy in that regard. I don't necessarily care about another big exit event either. I've come around to the idea that is not espoused by me, but espoused by Permanent Equity and all these other different capital, you know, funds who have sort of said, you don't have to exit the way we define it. Typically, you could just have a cash flowing business that isn't going to trend out. You know, I think a lot of stuff people are working on nowadays, it does have a half-life and they need to sell because it's sort of a game of hot potato. I think many SaaS tools, companies generally, you're just playing a game of hot potato. And when you sell and you come up with the valuation, the new buyer is also thinking, you know, when will this die under our ownership, regardless of our abilities? Just when will this concept no longer be that interesting? When will this concept become obsolete? Everyone's trying to calculate the Xeroxification of their SaaS, but I'm interested in ideas that seem they could stick around a long time. Brick and mortar businesses have this built in. if you own a sandwich shop, your competitor could come in and make better sandwiches. Maybe the health department shuts you down because there's rats mixed with your pepperoni. But otherwise, people are always going to have to eat, and sandwiches are probably, despite our current political climate, they're probably not going to get canceled, and everything will be fine. Whereas you have like an AI chat tool, I don't know, man. I don't know what that looks like. No matter how great your tool is the concept of chatting with customer service even going to exist in a few years? Like, what is like the really macro thing there? So I think a lot of businesses, it's all about the exit. The types of ideas I'm interested in now are ones where we would never have to sell to some other fund. We wouldn't have to play that game of hot potato. We can just have healthy cash, dividends and distributions for the owners. I think that's also an honest way to build a business, because it's going to change all of your tactics, right? Everybody is familiar with the concept of pump and dump. That's typically used for, like, I don't know, stocks or crypto or something, but it's sort of something people can do in the LBO model as well, right? Where you can cut a lot of costs and pull a few strings to get a few intros and get big contracts, and then try to sell it to the next guy on all of this potential and goodwill. And then it doesn't work out very well for the next guy. So I'm just not interested in any of those kinds of games. And, can't say I haven't ever kind of played them to some degree. But going forward, I want to just dig into something that's going to take several years to achieve its vision. I'm a big fan of actually setting vision and mission and objective statements at each company. I write monthly stakeholder updates at each company to reflect on. I don't treat businesses as just like a money printing machine, but I also acknowledge that if a business adds value, it makes money, and that's great. And I never let my identity get caught up in that. So to start barely scratching the surface, answering one of your questions about when to know when to sell and as founders, I would say two things. One, identity. So many people tie up their identity with some code. I mean, it's really depressing when you think about it, or when you articulate it that way. And two, greed. And those two elements can mesh together in such a way that they mask what's really going on. So in other words, I could be really greedy about what I think my SaaS app is worth. Someone maybe even makes me a legit offer, and I go, no, I won't sell for less than X, right? Every founder, a lot of founders have sort of said this or thought this. And it could be my greed getting in the way. But what I tell myself is that it's my identity, and, I am destined for greatness. I can grow this much bigger. Every founder has read 100 stories of someone who said that they didn't sell, and then they grew it to something, much more massive, and had a bigger exit later. So it's all this like confirmation bias, survivorship bias, all this stuff working together in concert. But underneath all of it, it could just be like scarcity mindset and greed. I'll never have another useful business idea ever again. Scarcity mixed with, well, for whatever reason, I think the business is worth X because, my mom told me, or because I read a book one time. And I've tried to always hedge against myself. And I think one of my best traits is that I am not greedy at all. We just exited 3 small businesses a couple months ago. I put them on an online marketplace, and I got offers for my asking price for each of them within 72 hours. And I was very happy with that. I didn't care about doing the auction process. I wasn't planning to, accept an offer that was less than my asking price, but I also didn't get that typical bummed out feeling of, oh crap, I got an LOI for my asking. Oops, maybe I screwed up. No. Because this is a long-term game for me. I learned a lesson. Maybe my asking prices are a little low. So next time, if I build or buy and grow and sell a SaaS, my asking price calculation will be a little higher. That was my lesson. I didn't wallow in grief or greed, because guess what? If I had the greed element, and this is kind of something Naval talks about, I would win a couple deals in the short term, but in the long term, I would miss out. I would miss out on a lot of returns. I would miss out on a lot of potentially joy, happiness, feeling of accomplishment, because that greed wouldn't always work. Sometimes it would burn me. And those are the stories we see a lot more nowadays as the markets have had some issues, where people are saying, hey, I'll just be upfront. I got an offer to sell for X. and I had to sell way later for Y, which was a fraction of X. And I'm way more interested in avoiding that outcome than trying to juice every dollar. And so that also has kind of gotten into my mental framework for if I talk to founders who say, when should I sell? How much do you think I can get for it? It's like, well, separate your identity from a bunch of code. Acknowledge what's really going to maybe be a life-changing amount of money. It's probably even less than you think, depending on how wise you are, spending and investing it later, and go from there. And if they sort of aren't interested in that, it's like, well, I have nothing else. I have nothing else to tell you, because we're not playing the same game here. You have a scarcity mindset. You have greed. You have your identity wrapped up in this thing. I can't help you. And that's okay. Some people's brains are broken, and we depend on other people's brains not functioning as well as ours to do anything in the making money world, right? Like, the whole point is that you're good at this, I'm good at this, and we trade. You don't understand software. I don't understand how to make beef. We trade. But it happens inter-industry as well. Just because we work in tech doesn't mean that everyone has read all the same ideas or interprets things the same way. And so I've tried to, in a very, again, long way around, trying to answer.
No, go on.
One of these questions.
It's so good. It's so good. It really is so good.
I love your thought process there. Wait, go. If you want to finish, because we probably I got comments.
No, I'll shut up. Let's skip more.
Oh, Omeed, you say something, because I feel like you want to say something too. I have some stuff to say too.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, okay, so I heard you say, that I think, the two keys of your success that kind of make you a reasonable seller is like really what I hear. Like, you're a reasonable seller, are not wrapped up in your identity, and you're not greedy.
Or not identity not wrapped up in the company.
Right. Yeah. You're just not. You're not. Yeah. Your identity is not wrapped up in the. Because
if he's not wrapped up in his, if he's not wrapped,
and you're not wrapped up in your identity, like,
then he's probably on a mountain peak meditating somewhere. If he's not wrapped up,
that he must have been. I mean, how do you get there? That was going to be my question. It's like, cool. You tell these founders, like, hey, don't get your identity wrapped up in the company. Well, like, can you actually, like, explain to us how one does that? How did you get to that place? Like, that's so interesting.
Well, let's start with, practically speaking, how does someone get to the spot where their identity is wrapped up in their company? What is our life? It's just a function of our time. Okay, we sleep 8 hours a day, so it's a function of like 16 hours a day. We work half of that, so it's a function of like 8 hours a day. And when you're a founder, so if a third of your life sleeping, that doesn't count. Third of your life you're in hangout mode, quote unquote. Third of your life you're working. As a founder, the hangout mode kind of mostly goes away. Even if you do take a break, watch a movie, go out to eat, you're still kind of thinking about your company. You have this background job that's always scheming and devising and plotting and worrying and stressing and sometimes brainstorming about your business. And so, in other words, literally your life becomes your company, your job. So it makes sense. It follows that you work on something for a few years, day in and day out, most of the days of the week. And eventually you kind of look back and you're like, well, yeah, if my life is a function of time and I spend all my time working on the company, and your life is, I don't know, manifestation of your identity, then sort of, again, it makes sense that your identity is that company. And now to get to the second part, which is how do we avoid that? Well, even when I was founder of FOMO, which I think is the most important thing I've ever done up to this point, I was still sometimes logging out of the FOMO email and going and writing support tickets for some other random SaaS tool that we bought. And I was still sometimes digital nomading for 2 years and traveling to different places and taking surf lessons. And I was still sometimes recording albums every 6 to 8 months with different producers, and moving to LA temporarily to go to engineering school to learn how to use, a DAW and Pro Tools. Like, no matter what, I was in the middle of things that could have been absorbed all of my time and become my identity ostensibly. I never really allowed them to, by just overcommitting and saying yes to many, many different things that were sometimes in a similar realm, like another SaaS tool or whatever. But a lot of times were not similar at all. I mean, I've binge watched as many shows and movies as anybody out there who has absolutely nothing to show for the last 8 years of their life. I've watched all the same stuff. I've had all the same, experiences. I've wasted just as much time. I've slept in the same amount of hours. And I did that by not being some superhuman. It's the opposite. It's like because I waste so much time, I'm able to take a step back on a regular basis, like we're talking almost everyday basis, and go, this thing that I did today in front of a screen where my hands were, that is not, who I am. And that's why I opened up this chat today with,
I think you're a
musician.
multi-hyphenate. You're a multi-hyphenate and you're comfortable being a multi-hyphenate. And it sounds like you've been a multi-hyphenate for like a good period of your life.
Okay, what is this term?
I've never heard this phrase. This is great. A multi-hyphenate.
A multi-hyphenate.
Are you talking about like
you have many identities, and so all of your identities are multi-hyphenated in that I'm this, and I am a musician, and I'm a techie, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a surfer, I'm a traveler, I'm all of these hyphenated things are all of your different identities. And so there was never an opportunity for that one identity to take root, because it's so like, would you say that lands? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would say, but I would also say, look, I would never want to write down in a bio, I'm this dash this, it's just like, I'm interested in these things. Here's projects that I've shipped related to each of those disciplines. My skill level at each of these things that I'm interested in is at very different, disparate levels. Surfing is like way down here, right? Something else is going to be a bit higher. But yeah, I mean, I remember being a much younger kid. I don't remember this actually. My mom told me, I remember her telling me years ago that as a much younger kid, we were out shopping or something, and her friend came up to us at the grocery store and is like, "Who are you? What's your name?" And, trying to be nice to a little kid. And I said, "I'm me." So I think, in other words, to self-deprecate a bit, there's sort of like, there's a self-involved perspective you could take on that too. It's like, I don't know, I'm me. And I think there's a lot of advantages. We see this online nowadays. Everyone's really getting into personal branding. And this isn't a brand new idea, but I'm seeing it more and more on X, where you see someone say, I think I just saw this a couple days ago, someone's username is like the mobile park home guy, right? And then there's strip mall guy. And there's, like people are going really deep. They're not even just saying like the PE guy, right? That's not interesting. You have to say like the storage unit guy. And
that's so
it
funny.
works because of all of our lizard brains are just, we want to consume 40 characters and go, oh, that's what they are. Yeah.
But it's so funny how you connect this identity conversation, which is a problem, with this identity conversation, which is a totally viable marketing and branding strategy.
Yes. Yes. So
I just thought it's so funny how you made that leap. I agree with you. It's very important to do that. But it is funny. Yeah. Especially if you did that for 30 years and like on your grave, it was like the mobile park guy.
Yeah. Look, to summarize,
Yeah.
To condense what it is that you do into this elevator pitch, 40 character biography, will have two outcomes, one positive, one negative. Positive outcome, it will increase your conversion rate. Negative outcome, it will decrease your soul. And I'm a lot more interested in protecting my personal salvation than, the metrics of someone seeing one of my posts on x.com and clicking through, who's this guy? And, oh, he's that guy, self-ascribed. And I'm interested in that. So I'm going to follow. I have a more nuanced approach. My whole strategy on social media, it's very simple. Gain one follower, lose two followers. And it's been working very well for many years. And what it ensures is that I have true fans. And I don't have very many true fans. We all know the essay by Kevin Kelly and the concept that's been spread around of 1,000 true fans is enough to support you as a creator or something. I call BS. I think like 47 true fans is enough to support you and have a very, very good life. Again, as long as you don't, you're not addicted to heroin, I don't think any number of true fans will help with that. But I've had a very good life by having a very small cabal of true fans who get it, who don't need me to say, I'm an aspiring K-pop singer, or I'm a founder, or I'm a marketer, or I'm a self-taught developer. I've gotten into these different skills and interest, again, at very different levels of know-how. But what I'm really trying to communicate, or the identity, is that I don't want to have an identity that's summarized in a couple words, despite the bounty that brings in the short term. In the long term, I don't think it's good for my personal health. And I think it's also going to then limit you. So you wake up on a Saturday, the full day is your oyster, right? You can do anything. Maybe you don't have any errands. You can literally do anything. But if you are the mobile park home guy, no offense to that guy, he seems like a great guy. This is an actual person.
Yeah,
I
this
just
is not
follow him this week. But if you're the mobile park home guy, you might have an idea. It could be anything while going on a walk on this Saturday afternoon. It could be a business idea. It could be a new hobby. And you're going to subconsciously swat down that idea and say, well, I can't do that because that doesn't align with my strategy as the mobile park home guy. And that is my fear, that I will have a good idea and I will delete it subconsciously because it doesn't align with an 80 character summarization of what my supposed skills and interests are. I'd rather just let things, take me where they may. And I think I'll say the word, I hate this word, but I'll say the word, that's a privileged position to be in. There's a period of time for all of us where I think we should just grind on developing a particular skill so that we can turn that skill into a lifestyle, into cash, rent, mortgage, whatever it is that you want. Hopefully not heroin. But after, we get over that threshold, I think it's a good idea, not only for ourselves, but I'll even say for the universe or for our community, family, whatever you want to call it, that we allow ourselves to explore other things. Because often the people who have done really amazing things in the world, they didn't start out, on that track. They sort of instead cultivated a mind of exploration and getting deep just enough in something to make an impact, and then kind of moving on to something else. And I would say that's more of the rule than the exception.
Yeah, no, I hear you loud and clear. I love this. This is an awesome conversation. I love this. So one thing I want to take us to is this conversation of, okay, say you're a PE buyer out there. What are some lessons they can learn from you with your micro SaaS acquisition and sale experience? For example, what are some of the criteria that you've utilized or would advise other people to utilize in defining whether a company has already achieved product market fit, and any other information you give them? I was going to make this horrible pun about how you were exiting so that you could exit. But then you said that you're not necessarily intending on exiting the next business. And so I felt totally let down. I was like, you're like a Rick and Morty episode where you've taken the meta of the meta to the meta, but you're not Rick.
Well, yeah, I don't have any good comeback for that. It's like when Costanza had a great comeback, but 7 seconds later, and the limit is like 3 seconds max for a good comeback, which now that's my comeback. But I would say, well, first I want to ask you, you mentioned earlier, actually, when you alluded to this in product market fit and buyers, what they're looking for, you said something like, there's a standard agreed upon definition of product market fit. I wanted to put it back on you. What do you think is that standard definition of product market fit?
Sure. So the standard perspective that everybody has is, okay, you have a product and you have a specific target market. Now, this is where it gets ambiguous. What is that market? You already have to define something there. And that market is in demand of the product you're supplying. And then we have to talk about substitutes and pricing, and there's all these other things that go into that equation. But generally, you have a product somebody wants to buy and is buying. And again, if they're choosing you over the competitor, there's all these other little micro factors or attributes we could take into consideration. that's from, I'll just say it here, that's how I look at product market fit on a general level. But then when we actually look at it a little bit closer, it's something much more complex than that. And so that's kind of where I wanted to lead the conversation to have you discuss your thoughts on the subject.
Yep. Okay. Well, my definition would also be a little more nuanced than that. And I understand that first take of it. And I think that's a good working definition for people who are just building things from scratch. When you start buying stuff, though, now you have a lot of skin in the game. We need to have a few more lenses through which to evaluate opportunities, right? Because nobody wants to buy a lemon. And I'd say, first off, that
is this the cheat code?
Yeah.
Okay.
The cheat code. Okay. Maybe we're getting there. And I'm not Ty Lopez. I'm not saying I'm not holding back the cheat code. I thought I already shared the cheat code. The cheat code is that it's easier to buy something than build something. That's the cheat code.
No, yeah, but just go on, just dive in.
Keep going.
Yeah, because you got to say what should I buy, right? And you have to evaluate that. So, first of all, in my opinion, the only satisfactory definition of product market fit should imply that the business can't die.
Okay.
So if someone says we have product market fit and later they died, I would say not that they're a liar, just that they were wrong or they had a bad definition. One example, a big example. It's something that I sort of studied and wrote a thesis on back when I was in school, and I majored in marketing. Only useful thing I got out of that degree is Webvan. Webvan, by all of these standard markers, had product market fit. Webvan was sort of like the precursor to Instacart / Amazon Fresh. Okay. Where you would buy groceries online and they would be delivered at your house within a couple hours in a plastic bin with freezer packs and everything. You could get meat, cheese, whatever you wanted. And it was an online e-commerce grocery delivery thing. And Webvan's customers loved Webvan. And the Webvan execution from a customer perspective, where you click stuff, add it to your cart, pay, and it's at your house a couple hours later, was very, very good. But they failed and they lost hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's like, did Webvan have product market fit? Well, in many ways we could say yes, because they were growing. And then you could say, well, they had product market fit, but they failed because they were too early. But to me, the market umbrella should include market timing. So you're too early or you're too late or you came at the right time. And the fit part should probably include like margins. Does it cost more to service the customer than they make?
Oh, okay, there's
right?
Part of
it. And then the product has to be adopted by the market. And where one place where Webvan went wrong was they were building robots in their own grocery store chain, and they were building a logistics supply chain, right? And they were building an e-commerce store. And now you fast forward a few years, you have like Instacart just goes public. They don't own any groceries. And then you've got, people who just own the groceries, but they don't have a delivery mechanism. And so Webvan got so many things, I guess, wrong. And I understand it's easy to say that now with perfect information. But whether we're looking with perfect information or not, I think it's safe to say that Webvan did not have product market fit, because if product market fit is the holy grail, but you can have it and still die, then I don't think product market fit is that great of a filter by which to evaluate opportunities. Because guess what? You can have product market fit and still die. Well, why don't I just build something of my own and then buy something?
I love I love what you're saying there, but I also have an objection back to make, which is, so say you got product market fit, but your CEO is committing fraud. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with product market fit. That company's doomed. And I don't know enough about Webvan's case, but it kind of sounds like they were probably pulling the classic hype startup thing where they were spending way too much and they weren't growing, they weren't protecting their margins. Is that correct in their case study or whatever in the actual history?
Well, by that definition, they wouldn't have product market fit because they were doing too much on all those other products that they were building, and that's why they
haven't had fit.
Yeah.
I feel bad because now we're like cutting into like something that's that you're trying to use as an example for something else, really. But I'm just trying to learn more.
Not at all. Well, I'd say to combat that, if that's the case, why didn't we see the equivalent of Instacart, Fresh Now, whatever, all these solutions immediately after their failure? You know, there was certainly no shortage of case studies written by business school, soon to be grads after the dot-com bubble crash and Webvan was among them. Why didn't someone step up and say, well, they just did this little bit wrong and this little too early? Why did it take, 15 more years for there to be Instacart and other solutions that kind of probe at, the different angles of what they were doing, the unbundling of Webvan? Why did it take so many years for that to kick off? I would say that's because there wasn't product market fit. If there was, all for except a few bad actors, we would have seen the respawn of Webvan, I think, immediately.
So I guess that's one takeaway I'm getting is your definition of product market fit is not only nuanced, but more expansive, such that it encapsulates a lot more than just, okay, you have a product, are people buying it?
Yes.
And I want to hear more about that.
So in finance, and I don't know anything about finance, right? I've learned just enough to not sound like a total idiot, but the quick ratio, right? Sort of like a BS number. And it's like 5 numbers combined into one, and it could be 1.4, these different values. And it's a quick evaluation of a business's health. I would say, excuse me, I don't know why I'm coughing. I'd say from the perspective of product market fit, there are similar, if product market fit is this black box, as Andy Grove from Intel, when he wrote High Output Management, he talks about your system is this black box. Humans are basically incapable of understanding any sufficiently advanced system. We make charts and, whatever to try to simplify. But once you have a system that's really complex, humans literally can't understand it. And all of the things that we do to try to wrap it up nicely is just kind of mental, what. And so I would say the way quick ratio is to the financial health of a business, there's equivalents of that for product market fit. One of them is churn rate. Over the years, we looked at many different SaaS, and of course, the founder will give you all types of metrics you want to look at if they're honest, right? During diligence, they'll give you the top line, the signups, they'll give you the CAC from their paid acquisition efforts, they'll give you the churn rate, and it's really easy to fall in love with top line metrics. They get hundreds of signups a day or a month, and page views and SEO rank and all of that. Excuse me. But some of the best deals we've done, and this is anecdotal, obviously, if by best deals, I mean 4 companies or something like that, but we have looked at hundreds and hundreds. The best deals were when the churn rate was so low that we didn't care about the other metrics. Where it's like, yeah, they only get 1 sign up a day, but literally no one ever cancels. I go,
but was that representative of them being great operators? I'm not saying that's the case, but it's a really...
No, I would say that's back to the product market fit thing. It's like...
And beyond that,
product market operator, team member, support manager fit, right?
Yeah.
Product market fit. It's like remove them from the equation. People are using this tool. They never cancel it. And then when you look at other metrics that would usually be negative, like, how often do you deploy to production? It's kind of fun to look at companies that are always shipping, right? They're deploying all the time. Maybe that implies they have up-to-date dependencies and tech stack, and they have a good deployment workflow, and they have good inter-team developer, communication. They have a good agile process. So you look at an app that deploys all the time, you go, that's good. But one of the apps we bought that had super low churn, they hadn't deployed in 2 years. They didn't even have a developer who could deploy. The founder had hired an agency to build it with grant money that she won, and the agency finished it, sent her an invoice, walked away. They never touched it. The last Git commit was literally 2 years prior to when we took over. And the churn was like 0. So I didn't care about any of these other quote unquote marketing metrics. So that's why I'm calling churn as almost like a quick ratio. It doesn't tell the whole story, but it gives you this interesting angle where it's like, whoa, wait, no churn and they never deploy code. Isn't that a way more interesting indicator of product market fit than someone who has hundreds or thousands of signups and they deploy 10 times a day? Who cares
I
about
think
that?
the market is trending in this direction, actually. I think the market is trending in terms of everyone is recognizing that it's not about more features. It's actually just about keeping the customers that you have. So that's the first thing. So that is super aligned with generally what I'm noticing like out in the world. Love that. The other thing I want to point out is it's really interesting hearing you identify churn rate as one of the important metrics for product market fit, because it also goes back to what it sounds like is a core value of yours, which is the 1,000 true fans model. The 1,000 true fans model is essentially don't churn, like have people love your shit so much that they never leave. So that's super interesting to kind of watch those two things be connected to each other from previously speaking to one another. And then there's a question in here. I would love to hear from you, Ryan, what you're based on your, because it sounds like you came to this understanding that churn rate's incredibly important as a metric. And, you develop this definition of what product market fit is based on your experience. So could you tell us a little bit about how you got there through maybe the FOMO experience? How did you come to this definition of product market fit?
Sure thing. So one of the other lessons that came from FOMO, but merges, I think kind of dovetails into this a little bit, is the power of being first. And that wasn't my idea, right? That's from 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, at least 20, 30-year-old book, 40-year-old book, I don't know. And it's just one of the 22 chapters, right? Where the power of being first. And they have case studies for each chapter. For that chapter, I think the case study is Coca-Cola versus Pepsi. It's kind of like, mic drop. Coca-Cola is much bigger and they probably always will be. And there are many such examples where the first kind of dominates because you take up that space in the consumer mind share. And then you just keep winning just because you were first. And of course, there's also counterexamples where now look at Webvan, they were first, but Instacart just went public. So I totally get it. And it's important to understand how to evaluate counterexamples to any of these heuristics that we hear about in marketing or finance or PE or whatever. But from FOMO, for example, the FOMO app was also the first. And so, but the app itself, what we did, these notifications where you would see, Omeed just bought this 5 minutes ago. It's like social proof, recent sales notifications. But then we started showing more than sales. We started showing 37 people are looking at this product right now. And suddenly it's like, well, how do you really articulate that? There wasn't an obvious way, and there still isn't today, an obvious way to articulate what that app is, even though we've all seen it. We've all gone to an online store with this type of product. So what people started doing was just searching FOMO app. They started searching FOMO app, but our website was FOMO. So we would rank, and people weren't necessarily even aware that an app called FOMO existed. They just heard that used as a way to describe the concept. So for example, I don't even follow Paul Graham anymore because he blocked me years ago. But sometimes someone will retweet him and I think it will show me for a second. And if I click it, will say they blocked you. But the other day he said something about the term chat GPT wrapper. And I don't know what he said because I clicked and then it disappeared. But to do some revisionist history here as it relates to this conversation, I imagine he was talking about how the chat GPT wrapper is now this term used to describe an app that purports to have AI, but under the hood is really just leveraging OpenAI to do the heavy lifting. But they're putting a spin on OpenAI. They're giving it some flavor or angle that OpenAI isn't going to do because OpenAI wants to just be very vanilla and give you an input text box. And I think something similar happened with FOMO and lots of tools. When you're first, is people will turn your company name into the acronym to describe it. So we have this with Xerox, we have this with Kleenex, we have this with other things too. Again, this is not my idea, but when you're first, you get to watch that happen, and that becomes part of, I think, developing product market fit in this sense. Because how can the thing that started it go away when everybody else is it's hard to pull the rug out from under something as more and more heavy things stack on top of it. So product market fit to some degree can imply that you are a critical piece of the tool belt or of the infrastructure of something, where they can't get rid of you even if they want to. And that compounded over the years, where we had like Stanford researchers were working with New York Times, and they did reports on social proof tools that are doing dishonest marketing, putting fake data, fake names, fake purchase history. And they used FOMO as one of the examples, and they created terms like dark patterns and blah, blah, blah. FOMO had 0 dark patterns. Our competitors were all kind of named as doing things that were shady. Excuse me. So it's like these kind of things kept happening where we were so embedded in the space. You can't talk about social proof marketing tools without, I think, making some kind of reference or paying homage to FOMO, even if you never use the FOMO tool, because it's like, of course you've seen it, and you would be silly, or you would look like you don't know what you're talking about if you say that you're like into social proof marketing and you haven't used the tool. It's like someone who does email marketing, you have to know MailChimp. You don't have to use MailChimp, but it's going to be a red flag to other people if you say MailChimp, what's MailChimp? It's like, wait a second. And so I think that can also lend itself into saying, yeah, we have product market fit, because it's like people can't have a conversation about what it is that you do without at least somehow giving a hat tip to you.
Your stature in the industry it speaks on its own behalf, pretty much. It's like our stature in the industry like represents our product market fit, because when you think social proof tool, you think FOMO.
Yes, it's like when you're living rent free in people's heads, that's probably another one of those quick ratio like elements of product market fit, where you don't have to pay for clicks just to get people to look at you or talk about you. They will do it on their own. And a very simplified version of that is simply saying when you flip the funnel from outbound to inbound. But I don't think inbound is really a good, sufficient, nuanced example, because there are so many businesses that grow or get top line inbound growth and then they still die. So I don't want the takeaway to be, oh, when you grow inbound, it means you have product market fit, but it's just another one of those little black box windows you can look through and say like, hey, even if we pay to grow, we will grow faster when other people talk about us than when we talk about us. And that is more so specifically the inflection point, one of the inflection points for getting product market fit.
Organic marketing.
Organic, but like, again, everybody would say our marketing mix is, or, you know, we spend this much on ads, we rank on this many articles or for this many keywords, and they can show you their attribution and say, here's how many signups or registrations come from each channel. And so everybody probably has hopefully some sense of organic marketing. You have some referrals, you have some paid ad clicks, you have some partnership, all the different. And what I'm trying to get to, even to myself right now, is that there's some critical mass of organic inbound that when you breach that, it's an indicator of product market fit, not merely the existence of organic inbound.
It's like the quick ratio, but for, you know,
where the customers come from, quick ratio.
Where the
yes.
customers come from. Yeah. Joe, you got anything?
Oh yeah, I got a lot of things. So, okay, that's really great. I want to take a little spin on this and say, okay, we talked a little bit now about, okay, as a buyer, what are some things you look at under the hood for the business to still be alive and churning out and even growing, you know, a few years later? Are there any other, or I'll just say one, like, why don't you give us another story and another example of another thing that you find very important to buyers and maybe even essential to your prior strategy of targeting and finding businesses to buy? We talked a little bit about PM. You know, just throw another thing out there. We're not trying to get too, we're not reinventing the wheel here. There's probably a lot of factors you have that you could talk about.
Sure. So here's another one that, again, you can read about this concept. There's probably 1,000 blog posts that write about this. But I found it to be of particular, let's say, top 3 importance of the myriad, you know, elements, factors you could look at. I'd say this is top 3. So it could be useful to talk about it as a prioritizing exercise. And it's whether or not the likelihood of your customer building it themselves, whatever the solution is. And remembering also that building it, quote unquote, building it themselves isn't sufficiently answered by asking whether the customer is a developer. And I think a lot of buyers, they'll go look at an app and they'll say, okay, this app helps local restaurants get more reviews on their Google Places and Yelp listings. Okay, that's an example. And there's probably 50 apps that do this, and some of them make a lot of money. And so they'll say, well, I think I want to buy this app. This kind of thing could work forever. It's not hot potato. There's always going to be restaurants, and online listings and reviews are of increasing importance as more people build restaurants. So, okay, it checks all those boxes. And you go, okay, well, it costs $100 a month for these small businesses, but they don't have developers who can build this kind of tool. So check. I'm going to buy the company. And what I would say is when you're going through that step of your due diligence, can they build it on their own? It's important to remember that build does not have to mean with code. And I'm not just mentioning or hinting at like no code solutions. I'm hinting at absolutely anti-code solutions like pen and paper, right? Somebody said years ago on Twitter, I think, like, remember that the biggest competitor to every young startup is Google Sheets. And I always remembered that. It stuck with me because Google Sheets is this vanilla tool that you can do anything with. You can run cold email campaigns. You can build financial products. You could, I don't even want to try to enumerate because we already know. You can do anything with a spreadsheet because you have these functions and you can insert JavaScript, and it's like you can do stuff that you didn't even know you could do with a spreadsheet, right? And so many startups are trying to just compete with that and they don't realize it. And I think when you're a buyer looking at tools, it's useful to detect and maybe even look for counterexamples of your target audience that would never pay for this tool, not because they can literally build it with code, but because they can get the same outcome with some other concoction, some other type of solution that you might not be clever enough to think about. I know one practical example of this is like Zapier, right? Many businesses have built out probably in aggregate tens of millions of sort of bespoke processes at their company, just using wrangling together different zaps and automating this over to there and over to there and filtering it and blah, blah, blah. And I think a lot of businesses that we're looking to buy are competing with Zap automations that we don't know exist. And it's worth putting our brainstorm hat on and saying, well, if I was a potential customer, but I couldn't afford or didn't want to pay for this, how would I solve that problem? And it's almost like an exercise where if you're easily able to brainstorm how you would get around paying for some tool that you're thinking about buying, that's a good indicator to maybe not buy the tool.
Yeah,
what you want is to scratch your head and go, what they do is so unique. How could I ever get this done without a tool like that? And then you want to buy that company.
One thing I'm noticing here from our conversation is when we talk with a lot of acquirers, they talk a lot about, hey, this is how I'm going to turn the business I'm buying and grow it. You talk a lot about, and this could just be we don't have all the data in the world. I'm just inferring from limited data here, but you talk a lot about how is this company going to even survive if we're going to spend money on it? In the due diligence phase, obviously, as us lawyers, that's a big thing for us too, obviously. I find it really interesting, though. And so do you have some specific horror stories or experiences that you've had where you were like, frick, we bought this business, it died, this is never going to happen again on my watch, or anything like that?
I'm kind of going through that now. And that's what's kind of interesting is, or it's funny or interesting at my expense, but I'd say, first of all, PE, unlike maybe some other skills, like if I play guitar, and I did play guitar, over the years, I get slowly better at guitar. But with certain skills, there's so many other variables that are out of our control. You could do PE for 20 years and your best deal is in year 2 and your worst deal is in year 18. And it's worth remembering that you're not just linearly always going to improve your chops. Things can actually get worse as you learn more. It's kind of counterintuitive. And so that's something we're going through now. at our fund Fork is our latest deal. We did, I thought, enough due diligence. We didn't do certain types of due diligence that would have maybe led us to not even doing the deal. But essentially, we have a situation now where we have top line user growth. We've improved the product. It looks better, works better, has things that customers have said they needed. We've gotten expansion revenue. So we've gotten customers to upgrade in order to access new features. So many things we're doing right. We're following the playbook, our own playbook, and the playbook that a lot of the common, mind seems to share in this space. But what we found out, or very somewhat recently, is that someone can look at our tool, be totally mentally, spiritually sold on using our tool, but logistically cannot begin using our tool for like 5 months because our tool requires integrating with their logistics with Amazon and Walmart, whoever they sell with. It's a B2B SaaS tool for e-commerce sellers. And that's just not even a question we thought about during due diligence, because during due diligence, we looked at the metrics and saw this many people book demos every month, this many people sign up, this many people upgrade, here's the churn rate. I didn't think about the unique aspect of customer onboarding being a 7-day period of time that might be 5 months after they hear about you. And how do we set up CRM, sales ops, et cetera, to handle that nuance of onboarding customers at this business? So that's one example where I wasn't working with my strengths. I was taking that approach of like a little bit of, I know what I'm going to do here. It's B2B marketing SaaS. It's geared towards e-commerce customers. I've literally spent the last 7 years of my life doing B2B marketing SaaS to e-commerce customers. But that doesn't mean I was aware of all of their problems. That doesn't mean I was aware of Amazon fulfillment logistics and how often you do inventory refreshes. Apparently it's like 3 times a year, not once a month, right? So I had like these bad assumptions going into it. And then we also had another issue with customer concentration. This is another common thing that anyone will tell you. It's like a textbook example of what to maybe avoid or look out for when you're doing PE. You want to avoid a high customer concentration because then one customer cancels and you lose half your business or whatever. So we're going through our checklist, through our due diligence. Hey, let's make sure that there's a bunch of different customers, right? We don't want any one customer to be on a special plan where they're 20, 30% of the revenue. So we go through the numbers, we go through a payment processor, and we don't spot that. We spot like the biggest customer is like, let's say 3% of the revenue or something like that. It's like, okay, we're good to go. Well, a few months ago, one of our customers says, hey, can you please cancel these 19 customer accounts? I'm like, hey. And I go through payments and every account has a different credit card, a different email used, a different domain, a different everything. Guess what? It was an agency that signed up all of their clients on their own client account. And that's something I could have caught. I'm not blaming the previous founders or anything like that. I only blame myself. But it's the kind of thing where, I don't know, you don't train for that. How do I look through every customer account to see if their logo is on another customer account's website? Like, it's just a weird, it's just a quirk that, we didn't see during diligence. And again, not the previous owner's fault or anything, but that was just that. So that's something that happened, right? We lose a ton of customers overnight. They're all very, very different. We ask for feedback. They don't reply. And actually just today, a couple of them came back, which was cool. Literally a few hours ago, hey, can you reinstate our account? I deleted some of their accounts data. So I was like, not really. You guys, so it's like, I don't know, maybe a fit of rage. I was annoyed months ago and I deleted some of their accounts because I just thought, okay, like if you're not even going to give me feedback, I don't see why we should keep harboring your data in our database. But that's just a very real, raw example where you could still make mistakes years into it, thinking that you have a lot of the bases covered, because there's always something else. There's always something new. It's, again, back to like the unknowns that can really be what kills you. And so when you're evaluating businesses, it's like, yeah, anybody will give you a checklist of here's 100 due diligence questions to ask. And it's fine to ask all of those. It kind of costs you, the buyer, nothing. It costs the seller a lot. They have to spend their weekend, in line answering a Google Doc. It costs you nothing. But even after you send them 100 due diligence questionnaire, you still have to then think about what are the things that I don't know. And by definition, that's not something you can figure out. It's not something, you don't know what you don't know. That's the whole point. And so in those cases, where it comes down to when you're doing the due diligence is, can we afford, or to what degree can we afford to experience a long tail event that is incurred by an unknown? And so when we look at businesses, tactically speaking, I don't necessarily look too much at the valuation. I look at how long can we afford to wait to get our money back? So like people call that the payback period. If you pay 3x, maybe your payback period is actually like 2.5 years, because if you can grow things 10%, then, you shorten your payback period. That's kind of how I look at it, is like, how long can I afford to eat shit at this company and not make any money, right? I don't look at like how much does it cost and it's 4-year multiple. I don't care about any of that really. How long can I afford for this to not work out? And, we're lucky with our latest deal. We made the most mistakes with this deal, but at the same time, we have the greatest ability to afford those mistakes, literally, financially, as well as just spiritually, emotionally, mentally. Like, I can handle it. If this happened to me 7 years ago, I'd be very disheveled and bummed out and deflated that like my second PE deal was like crashing. Now it's like our 15th thing. So I'm like, okay, this is just how the game goes, so we can handle it. But that's kind of maybe to synthesize that. The question is, how long can I last if this doesn't work out? Because there will be unknown unknowns, and stop trying to figure out the unknown unknowns, because by definition you can't.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really seeing that. I mean, obviously, like all PE people out there have their own list of what things they look at, and often have highly targeted targets. So they're very familiar with those industries. So I don't really feel like I can dive any further on this topic per se at this time. I felt like that was really good and stuff, but maybe this might be time to switch gears. Omeed, do you have anything you want to add, or maybe you want to take us on a different pathway for this convo?
2 questions. First, why did Paul Graham block you on Twitter?
I think he tweeted, from what I recall, he tweeted something about religion or beliefs. And I said something very vanilla, but in defense of an intelligent designer. I don't know if I said the word Jesus or God, or just literally said intelligent designer, and insta-block. And ever since then, that's just been one of many examples. I alluded to this earlier. A lot of people, their brain is broken. And Paul Graham is so wicked smart in some ways, and he's a complete idiot in others. And to tweet about the existence of God, what you should expect is that some people will reply with an opinion about the existence of God. Seems like logical to me, but he's one of these people that wants to live in his own echo chamber. And that was sort of my key takeaway. That's why. And then it sort of starts to click everywhere. So you go to his blog, awesome blog. I've read a bunch of his posts, his essays. Guess what's not available on his blog? Comments. Upvotes, downvotes. It all starts to kind of click. You're like, this is one of those types of people. So he's always right. He's very, AKA he's very fragile, right? Maybe this implies that his wife doesn't disagree with him. His family members at Thanksgiving try not to disagree with him. That's his thing. And I have a thing. I have things, multiple things. I'm not perfect. I have my own quirks and problems, and people might identify them about me, but that's his thing. And so now, anytime I want to evaluate his opinions, I have to remind myself, okay, this is an interesting idea, but it's coming from someone who cannot handle an opposing idea. And how should that impact how I interpret this idea? And you have to do that with every one of your information sources. And it can get exhausting if you try to do that with your really close relationships. I don't suggest doing that with, your wife or something. But when we're in their business mindset from like 8 to 5 or whatever your hours are, and we're just trying to like feed our families and make money, and everybody has an opinion, and everybody has startup advice, and everybody has like, here's the 7 things you have to know before you buy your next company. We have to have filters for all of that. And to develop those filters, we have to do a little bit of investigating. And sometimes it's as easy as just replying to people and poking the bear and seeing how they interact with things that they don't necessarily agree with, And that's how we can develop filters, which AKA are just our judgment. And this whole game, whether, you know, you're going to buy something in code, or you're going to buy something and hire someone to run it, or you're going to, the whole game that all of us are talking about here is judgment. And we're on this podcast and we're having conversation, figuring out what kind of judgment abilities do you have that I don't have, that I can adopt into my worldview, and vice versa. We're just swapping judgment filters to develop our own taste so that we can perform better at what we do. So part of that judgment is realizing where other people's judgment is flawed.
Interesting. Yeah, that also, I see so many like parallel themes in our conversation. You mentioned earlier, you know, evaluation of heuristics, and it sounds like that's another important value for you. So that was one question. Another question is, you know, you've bought some businesses, you have a PE fund. It's called Fork, right? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
The Fork Fund. Why did you call it Fork Fund? Tell us a little bit about the fund, and would love to hear about some wins that you've had there.
So our fund officially is called Fork Equity, but we sort of refer to it as just Fork because equity, you know, we couldn't get fork.com. And we call it that because it's a solution for founders at a fork in the road. And a very illustrative example of that I've seen play out literally many, many times with these solo technical founders who can sort of do all the things, right? They can build the product, deliver it, service the customers, et cetera, to varying degrees. They get to some point where they're, let's say, a top 1%er in their country. If they're in America, maybe that's 10 grand a month revenue or 15 grand a month revenue. You're like top 1% earner. If you're in another country, it could be much less than that. And they get to this top 1% earner and they sort of start to realize, I'm very lucky, or I've hopefully they accept a little bit of humility that they're lucky and that they figured something out and yada, yada. And now they go, what do I do next? And the logical thing is, okay, well, I could hire people, right? I'm at 10 grand a month and I could hire some people and grow this to 20, 30, 50K or whatever, and so on, right? Keep hiring people, keep growing. But a lot of them have a very risk averse mindset where they go, well, I just don't believe anyone could do as good of a job as me at support, at coding, at marketing, at copywriting on our homepage, whatever. And so they struggle with that hiring thing. Or even if they go ahead and do it, they say, hey, I've saved some money. I'm going to take a risk and try to get this to the next level. They hire people and now they are back to like 0 a month revenue personally, take home dividend, or 2-3 grand a month. Now they need a day job again. They were just a 1% earner. Now they need a day job again because they've hired people and killed their whole margin. And that plays out a lot. And so a lot of them just sort of sit in this plateau area, which to us in SaaS is like the 10 to 20 grand a month zone, where you can just absolutely kill it, live your life. You can't buy a private jet, but you can do pretty much anything you want to do on that kind of revenue stream. But it's hard to scale past that, even if you're doing software, which is supposedly supposed to be infinitely scalable, but it's not, right? It's not, because someone's going to email you at 3 a.m. They need help resetting their password and they're going to cancel if you don't respond at 3:30 a.m. This has happened. I've been there. I used to get phone calls that woke me up at FOMO when we had thousands of customers because I didn't want to lose them because we couldn't scale without it. So anyway, to get back to the point, we named Fork after that concept, after that sort of conviction that there's a lot of people that we think we could, I don't want to say snipe, like we're going to damage them, but that we could identify who don't want to hire and take their income back to 0. And they also don't have the ambition to, I don't want to say ambition, but they don't have the interest. They're not that interested in trying to go the long route of restacking chips by hiring and managing people. And all of it honestly reminds me of the fisherman's parable, right? About the businessman that goes and watches the guy fishing. And
we literally, wow, this is so, Joe,
yeah.
Someone told this story on the last podcast episode.
I always just assume everybody knows the story and then no one applies it to anything. It's just like a cool story. But I try to apply it.
I was on mute, but I say that everybody, I think everybody knows it, but nobody fucking applies it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, well, how does this actually apply? You know, and here it's like, I applaud these solo founders who are at the fisherman parable crossroads.
Like, I'm good enough. Like, why do I need to scale it so I could have freedom? Because I have freedom right now. I make 10K a month. Like, why do I need to have 20 boats going out and catching fish?
And that's why I really dislike it when other people give this adjective of like, they're not ambitious enough, or, oh, well, maybe if you're more ambitious. It's like, no. Like, ambitious is knowing when you have enough and being willing to stop despite everyone else telling you need to scale or you need to do X and you do Y.
It's the lack of greed.
Lack of greed. Ambitious is Seinfeld shutting down everything in season 9, even though Jack Welch came to his apartment and offered him $1 million an episode to do a 10th season. He's like, I don't think so. So you're going to tell me Seinfeld wasn't ambitious? He just knew when to stop. And so I think that, that's kind of how we formed Fork. That was our conviction. That's actually on our homepage now. It took years, but we finally literally illustrated it on the homepage of Fork. There's like a guy with a backpack who's like, there's a fork in the road. Should I go this way or this way? New challenges and adventures, or keep slogging. And some people choose to keep slogging. It works out. Some people choose to keep slogging. It doesn't work out. Can't help those people. I'm here for the people who, like me, have a mindset that says, I can do this again. Let's clock a win, take a rest, and do it again. And I'll have more fun doing it that way. So that's kind of how we founded it. And those are the types of people we've tried to attract from a seller perspective.
I do differ with my definition of ambition also. I think ambition is just rank desire, and nobody even knows what that is. And then knowing when to call it quits is kind of just saying, knowing when you've had your fill, which is still desire. It's just a limited version of it. Americans, unlike a lot of other countries, are very addicted to ambition and greed. So yeah, I differentiate a little bit there. But just generally, like, that's so interesting about who you guys target, how that plays out. It makes a lot of sense. I can see that probably being very easy for you guys, or let's say relatively easy to identify people in that niche. And so, yeah, that's interesting. Omeed, you were asking the question, so why don't you continue?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah. So last piece, talk to us about some of the wins at Fork. Would love to hear about the wins, how you got there, what the journey looked like, kind of takeaways from those wins. Even though you shared some, I'd love to, if there are any more, I'd love to hear some more.
Our biggest win at Fork financially, of course, was selling FOMO. That was, kind of life-changing and just rewarding generally, because the new owners have done a great job stewarding it. They've continued to ship features pretty aggressively. They've expanded into new market segments that we didn't do. They've hired more people to work on it from a marketing and dev and customer support perspective. Like, they just seem to be doing a great job carrying the torch. And the vision at FOMO was to give honest entrepreneurs the credibility they deserve. And I think that they continue doing that. And that's sort of a vision I have personally for work I do. If I'm doing marketing, if I'm trying to sell something, it's like, well, is this honest? Is this actually not going to make the world a better place, like the startup mantra, but is this literally going to give a better experience to a customer somewhere? Are they going to have buyer's remorse or satisfaction at the other end of this transaction? So FOMO was our biggest win that way in a couple perspectives. But another really big win at Fork, also a big financial win, but more of a win almost selfishly from an operator manager perspective, was a Shopify app we bought called Cross-Sell. We bought this from a solo founder. Him and his brother were running it. They were doing really, really great. They actually still run several other Shopify apps. They build them from scratch. They have their own, I think, kind of fund that buys Shopify apps. We met in person in Toronto at Shopify Unite years ago, actually after we had done the deal. So we got to meet in person after we had done a deal together. But anyway, with Cross-Sell, I sort of had all of these ideas bounce around in my head from the FOMO experience. At that point, I had been running FOMO a few years, and I thought, all right, here's all the things I like about operating a SaaS. Here's all the things I don't like. I don't like doing customer support tickets at 2 a.m. I don't like waking up, and the moment I wake up, somebody on the team hits me with the fire drill of like, here's some bug that happened overnight. I don't like fire drills. I don't like meetings. I don't like waxing poetic about strategy and our mission if it's not going to actually help us make tactical decisions. So these are all these things, this laundry list. And so, but then I said, well, I do like product. I do like stuff built in Ruby on Rails. Like I had very specific things that are consequential and inconsequential, but all of them aggregate together to give you a good day or a bad day. They aggregate together to make you like your job or not like your day job, right? And so with cross-sell, I put all these things down to paper and then said, okay, well, I'm going to try to architect cross-sell, the operation of cross-sell, as my dream operator position. And it was kind of a test tube because cross-sell could fail, but we still had FOMO operating, making money, et cetera. And we had other projects in the pipeline. So again, this was kind of a selfish thing, but I treated cross-sell as like, how high leverage can I have as an operator? Because that's the holy grail. I think that some of us get interested in MicroPE to begin with, is like, wait a second. So there's a way that I can own something and other people operate it all day and I get dividends. And all I have to do to get that is like a little risk up front with a down payment. But even the down payment can be mitigated with SBA or non-collateralized debt. Like that's sort of like the rabbit hole people start to go down. And that's the holy grail, is you take a risk up front, you mitigate that risk, and then competent people make you money for a very long time. That's like, I don't want to say the promise, but that's kind of the pitch. But up until that point at Fork, I was doing all of the jobs. Like we had 10 team members, I think at the time, 10 full-time team members, but I was still doing support. I was still coding. I was still, running ad campaigns, whatever. And so I thought, how can I do it differently? So I put all these down to paper. We take over the deal. And within the first day, the support ticket inbox is filling up. We had just hired someone to help work on support. Obviously, they don't have all the information about what's going on, how to respond to customers. The first day we get a bug, and it's also like built in PHP. And my specialty is still Ruby and Rails. I didn't really want to deal with deploying this foreign app to new servers that I didn't understand. So like everything starts to hit the fan immediately, as is tradition. But I kept telling myself, I'm not going to fall back to my common ways. I'm not going to put my personal cell phone number on the homepage. I'm not going to obsess over giving people 11-minute turnaround time on a support ticket. People can suffer for a few days, not forever, but like this is a temporary transition period. Turbulence is okay. I need to be comfortable with this. We'll send a newsletter out to all the customers and let them know, hey, we have new owners and we're figuring things out and bear with us, kind of thing, which some businesses are still doing today from COVID, right? You call companies today due to COVID and it's like, really? Wait times, really? 3 years later? So I thought, this is okay. It's going to be fine. And it was fine because within a week, we had a developer taking over, understanding the code. We had a support guy teaching himself JavaScript so that he could give people better support. He became technical on the job. I never wrote a support ticket back to a customer. I never wrote a line of code. My day-to-day, we never had meetings. There were meetings. I didn't go to the meetings. Not saying that's a good thing, just being truthful. My tactical contribution to cross-sell was moving cards around on a Trello board. So they all had ideas, the developer, the support guy, they would put cards on Trello, Kanban, ideas, to do, doing, done, and so on. I would go in there a few times a week and kind of veto stuff. And I would also debate, I'm obviously not a tyrant, but we would debate through asynchronous comments on the Trello cards and deprioritize and archive, and I would add my own ideas. And over the next few years, we rebuilt the app into Rails. We grew it. We added lots of cool features. We made it look beautiful. We had contractors come in and out like for one-time tasks, but we had our same 2 core guys the whole time. And then we started doing distributions. The core guys got some equity as well. Then we sold it. They stuck with it with the new owners for a while until the new owners, did their own thing. And I looked back on the experience. It's like, that was the creme de la creme of a PE high leverage owner operator gig. We got in, we grew it, we got out. We were cash flow positive like every single month. We made dividends almost every month. I think the first few months we just allowed the money to just kind of stack up as retained earnings just in case, you know, but we still got that later, right? When we emptied the bank account and we just left the OpEx in there. It's like, so I kind of did everything, and I'm not taking too much credit. Like the credit literally goes to the two guys that actually ran it. I got the credit in the sense of the exit credit, but the actual effort was up to them. But that lesson taught me that yes, it's possible to do the super uber high leverage, you know, you own the railroad and someone else owns the tracks and someone else is the conductor. It's totally possible, but there's no way I could have pulled that off as my first deal because I didn't know what I didn't know. If it was my first deal was FOMO. I would have jumped in on day one. I would have been afraid to death of customers complaining, thinking they're going to churn out. We're going to lose our seats here. I would have immediately started learning to code in PHP so that I could fix bugs. You know, I just would have done things so differently, but I had a better, more grounded perspective on the long term of growing a useful, healthy business because I had done it as a founder and an individual contributor or practitioner, that I was able to take a step up or take a step back, or whatever, you know, words you want to use, to operate cross-sell at a 10,000 foot view. And I think that's what a lot of us want to do in PE, but it just, you know, for me, it took me a lot of hard-earned lessons doing the work one-to-one before I was actually able to step into that type of role. But it is possible.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I love that story. Omeed, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing is the experience at FOMO kind of gave you the fortitude and like understanding of how to take the 10,000 foot view as, you know, the operator of the business from the 10,000 foot view, as opposed to like FOMO was like boots on the ground, like Ryan's the guy making this happen. You know, he's the entrepreneur that wears all the hats. He's doing all the things. He sees all the buckets of the company. That all informed your ability to recognize at cross-sell, like, whoa. I don't want to be the guy wearing all the hats anymore. I've done that. I know what it's like. I know what all the hats look like, and I know what they feel like. So now we're going to put the right people in the right places so that I can just be the one, you know, managing essentially.
Yes. And when you put it that way, it makes me, two words just popped in my brain. It's like two sides of this dichotomy thing, where what I was probably doing at FOMO and what many people have done, whether they're the founder or they're a PE operator, but they get a little too involved in the day-to-day at their project, is you kind of become a martyr, and it feels good. In a sick way, right? To like, I'm sacrificing my physical health. I'm not sleeping. I'm not doing this for the benefit because nobody cares as much as I do, right? And many founders tell themselves this, no matter what your company is. It doesn't have to be software. You could be running the Italian restaurant down the street and you're just like, no one cares about, you know, noodles al dente the way I do, right? So you show up every day and you're the one that makes the al dente noodles. It's like, okay. But the other end of that dichotomy, the other word that popped up, could be wrong, is like the delegator. And the delegator has another unique personality problem, which is supposing that everything is beneath them, that they're too good to do, you know, to write customer support tickets or to write code and fix bugs, like, and that if they even look at that stuff, that they must be doing something wrong, and they're not following, you know, they're being very bad examples of Warren Buffett disciples, and, you know, everything's wrong. And I think if you adopt either of those identities, it's not going to be good for you. But I will say it's probably better to learn to be a martyr than to jump straight
interesting.
into
Not what I thought you were going to say.
Well, I thought he was going to say.
You thought I was going to say the opposite, both of you?
Yeah.
Omeed, I had the same thought as you.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say delegator, because I feel like so many people struggle with delegation. So it's like, how interesting. But yeah, that's interesting. Say more. I'm so curious. Why martyr over delegator?
I agree. People struggle with it. People have problems giving up tasks and letting someone else do it at maybe a lower level of competence. I get all of that. But I also think it's very difficult to defend the position that telling people what to do is like a real skill. It's almost like writing. Like, obviously there's people who are phenomenal writers. Literally their word choice is just artistic. And, you know, you read a sentence and you go, wow, it pops off the page. I get it. Most interesting writing is not written by good writers, though. It's written by people who have done interesting things, and they learned just enough about communication to write those ideas down and convey them to other people. And so I think something similar applies here. It's like, you'll figure out how to tell people what to do, and you'll do it in a way that actually is more like leadership than management. They'll be excited to follow your ideas and build the things you want them to build. And maybe that means working overtime. Maybe that means taking a pay cut, whatever. You'll learn how to do that on the job. But if you start as the delegator, you're never going to learn to code. You're never going to learn how to switch from active voice to passive voice when you're emailing someone a mistake that was kind of your fault, but you don't want to take blame on a paper trail. Those are things you learn from sending thousands of emails. That was a little too real, but those are things you learn. You don't learn that as a delegator. So it's a one-way valve almost, where you're going to have a much better time going from martyr to delegator than the other way around. Because if you start as the delegator, it's like the only way to go is up, right? Because everything else feels beneath you. But if you start as the in the business operator, every time you get to hire one person or check one task off your list or delegate one thing, you're making building blocks. You're personally growing your management leadership skills, and you are going to get to keep moving up if you're persistent about it. But if you start as the delegator, everything's going to be burning, and you're going to say, well, I don't know, it's not my problem, not my department. And that's like the last person you want in place. If you're like an LP and you bring you say, yeah, I trust you with my funds to go operate businesses. It's like, I want to know that you can write the code and sell the code, and not just that you're going to tell people what to do. I can get a monkey to tell people what to do. They won't be right all the time, but neither will you. So I don't see the big difference between those two entities.
I hear where you're coming at from regarding that.
When he puts it like that, I actually agree with him, but go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I do on that. I was going to continue to vibe on the subject, and I was going to say that the last remaining very tiny idealistic part of me that hasn't been murdered yet, it's that part of me says there must be some balance between the two, of constantly learning through experience and also delegating, but not going to the level of actual martyrdom where the owner, operator, founder, whatever, literally kills himself from overwork and not understanding how to allocate responsibility. The idealistic part of me wants to say, oh, there's this great balance, though. But the reality is I've so often seen people who don't know what the hell they're doing, delegating wrong, and maybe they're just really good at being egotistical. That's really the core skill set I see of a lot of bad delegators. They're just kind of like full of themselves and like, oh, you do these things that they think are right, which are not. And there's martyr, which just kind of has no value of their own time. I don't know. That's kind of where my mind goes, but I don't want to. I've already extracted myself from these martyr experiences. I don't even want to talk about it. You know, I can feel the stress rising up in my chest, where I'm like, no, don't do that. Stay far, far away from the martyrdom experience. Yeah.
Well, don't you think, what we're getting at here, though, too, is there's almost a shared consciousness out there. Think about just the word MBA, right? You guys might have MBAs. I don't, it's fine. No. But when people say MBA types, this is an expression. This is a phrase. I didn't make this up. Yeah, the MBA types, big talkers, they can, go to Stanford, start a search fund. They can get millions of dollars in committed funds, go find and buy a business, and step into that delegator mode on day one. And they might have some decent ideas and communication skills and things like that. But I just think that more often than not, if you start there, the cracks, all it takes is one crack to reveal it all. Whereas if you start as the martyr, the only way you can go, the only direction you can go is up. And look, if you're an LP, why do you really care if the person operating your business is doing the day-to-day work or not? You kind of don't, right? You just want the reports. You want the dividends. Personally, to me, it's a de-risking element if the person who's operating it can do the tasks. Where it becomes a challenge, and maybe this is where I'd agree with you. Maybe this is where I'd agree with you a little bit, Joe, is if I'm an LP in a fund where they have ambitions to buy a bunch of projects, and I've detected that the partners get too involved or they micromanage things, then I'm going to say, okay, well, I can't trust these guys to get more than one or two horses because they're going to be overwhelmed and they're not going to be able to scale. And we can't find more guys like them. That's why I'm investing in them. And so you have to know the limitations of the horse you're betting on. But on an individual deal basis, I would take the practitioner every time, and I would assume that they'll figure it out. Because again, nowadays, delegation doesn't have to mean in every case learning how to manage humans and build big, great teams. Sometimes technology can help. You could manage a 20-person customer success team, or you could implement, I don't know, Intercom's new AI chat tool and have just 2 people that have the power of the scale of 20 people. You never had to become this master Jack Welchian manager with HR as your number 2. You don't have to go through all of those steps if you leverage other tooling at your disposal. You could set up Zapier automations and pay $99 a month to them and probably bypass the first 3 or 4 hires for some of your tasks. Again, are you delaying your own personal growth as a manager? Perhaps. But I would rather bet on that guy as the LP than someone who finishes grad school and says, all of this is below me, and I don't know how to do this stuff anyway, and then just throws money at every problem. And I think probably part of the main reason I'm even coming at it from this perspective is simply because of the micro in front of MicroPE. When I talk about PE, I don't say that I do PE. I would always qualify MicroPE. And in the micro space, there's literally not enough margin on day one to throw money at all of your problems. A couple projects we've bought, like cross-sell as an example, on day one, we had the revenue to support, full-time developer, full-time whatever. Some of the projects we don't. But even the projects that are really small could become bigger than the project that started with enough revenue to support a team. So even that's not a good indicator of which one's actually a better deal for you. And that's why, again, I'm team martyr.
No, that's cool. That's cool. No, I hear you loud and clear. Yeah. Omeed, what you got to say?
Yeah, man. I mean, I work with a really amazing coach. His name is Dan Martell. You might be familiar with him. He has the book Buy Back Your Time, and his whole thing is like work yourself out of the job. So like maybe not labeling it martyr, like maybe just like, identifying like, hey, you got to start in this role, really understand like what it takes, build an SOP around it that's like actually in writing, which is like ultimately what all potential acquirers want anyway. That's going to drive like what the multiple of your business like incredibly higher. So some aspect of it has to exist, so that there's that aspect of things in terms of, making sure that the building blocks are in place so that, once you get to a certain place of like being able to operate that thing and you have enough understanding and knowledge of it, then you could put someone there. And then, and his whole kind of thesis is start with the lowest, like the most simple tasks first. So you want to get an executive assistant in place that's handling all, the bullshit admin first, before you start, and you get those off of your plate, make sure that you have the highest ticket items that you're focusing on that, command the highest hourly rate from you. And that's kind of the strategy. I would argue that another aspect of being the delegator, though, is like, if we're going to qualify, delegation, like I don't think you could be a good delegator without truly understanding the role itself, what it requires. And then there's a whole nother element to the delegation aspect, which it's like you also, in terms of like a human resources approach, like finding the right talent to get in the place that can handle the job, so to be a good delegator, I think is different from just being a delegator.
Well, and you just nailed it with, you said his book is called like
Buy Back Your Time.
Buy Back Your Time. It's like, well, you could buy back your time by doing the work and then learning, synthesizing what it looks like and writing down instructions and process for someone else. But a lot of people nowadays seem to think that you can study to skip that. It's like, go to this building in Manhattan in the Upper West Side by Morningside Heights, and then in 2 years, you can just skip all those steps. And I'm just, in a general sense, very bearish on the idea that you can ever skip any steps. Like you can take some steps slower, faster, you know, you might spend a year or a month on each step, like, but you just have to go through all of the motions. How quickly you can get through them and it can be an advantage that some people have that other people don't. But skipping steps, like anything that like smells like that smells funny to me. And I think MBAs are kind of a promise to skip steps. And so I'm very bearish on them if that's the reason why, you know, someone prescribes it for themselves. But, you know, open to being proven wrong. And I understand that many of the very, very large PE funds are run by MBA types, some of whom have never, ever operated businesses. But to me, my old school definition of like business is just sales. Like, so if you've never sold, then you don't know anything about business, like, because the whole thing is just that. And that's where I'm, again, bearish on those types.
I'm not going to fight you on that. Joe, what do you got to say?
No, I'm not going to fight you on that either. One of my big things in my tech days where I guess I was always doing tech and also doing legal. I was going to say when I wasn't working at law firms, but I don't think that dichotomy works or differentiation works very well. But I was going to say that I always used to have that MBA pet peeve, not about PE guys, but about VC guys, especially when you talk about SaaS. It's really easy to kind of to look at a business and think you understand it from a high level, but if you hadn't been operating a SaaS business or in that industry for a while, then you really don't know what's going on. But nowadays, SaaS is an old concept. Right now, I'm referring like 10 years ago, right? But now it's such a old concept. A lot of people have a lot of experience. In the earlier VC days, like the 2000s, it was easier to make fun of VCs than it is now.
Well, not to mention that the build in public kind of movement has actually done a little bit of a disservice to some people. And there's a lot of ways we could say it's done a disservice or a service, whatever. But the spectators now have a false sense of what it's like on the inside because you can LARP now. So you can be the VC who's never operated something. You're 23, but you went to a good school. So now you're an associate at a VC. Stop emailing me. And they've read all the same books. They've read tens of thousands of tweets. They've read case studies and threads, and they've read really intimate details from founders about day-to-day operations. So they actually really have, I don't blame them for thinking that they get it because they've consumed the stories, but they don't have their own story. But when you consume 10,000 stories, it all blurs together in your head anyway. We're not that smart. So you start to sense that someone else's experience is your experience. And then again, insert a crack. And suddenly you have to make a judgment. Like this happens in a small level. I do Duolingo, right? I'm on a 1,400-day streak on Duolingo, Spanish. I absolutely hate it. I do it every day. And so they teach you some new word or conjugation. And you're like, yeah, I get it on the fill in the blank ones. And then the next question, they don't have any of the things to choose from. You have to type it out. And you go, actually, I don't remember if the A was before the E on that word. And it's a crack. And that's what's happening nowadays with a lot of the MBA types, the VC types. I don't want to say VC types, but the people who are in these roles probably years before they ought to be in these roles. I'm not against the roles. I'm against, I'm wary of people who enter them prematurely. Like any 22-year-old, I don't think should ever be a venture capital. I think capitalist is like super, super silly. I worked at a VC fund from the age of 25 and I was the youngest person there. And that was probably also too young. And I had, been working on businesses by that point. But yeah, I think, you can absorb other people's stories. They feel like your story, other people's judgment. It feels like it's your judgment. And it gives people a false sense of what their abilities are. And then, but those people do have a good ability to persuade people to give them money. So then you aggregate all those together and you have a lot of people buying companies and crashing. And I think we're going to keep seeing that. We're seeing valuations go down over the past few months. There's been a lot of drama from like acquire.com and others recently that they are marking down businesses without the founder's permission. I think that's just going to keep happening. But again, that's not my mission to try to fix that. It's just an observation.
Yeah. Yeah, the reason why I said I wasn't going to fight you on this, and, we lost Joe. He'll be back here in a second. But, I did a post on this on LinkedIn recently. I'm not a proponent of any sort of quick fix, skipping steps. Welcome back, Joe.
Thanks. Yes, Jimmy, please chat again. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a proponent of any sort of quick fix pills or anything like that, or people skipping steps in any regard. And, you know, that's kind of that's what I shake my fist at with respect to the democratization of acquisitions. Is like a lot of people come into the space thinking that it's like the easy way to get into business. And that's kind of the way that it's sold to a lot of people. And it's not the easy way to get into business. You have to do business to understand business. Like, I think the failures are so important. The learned lessons are so important, and you're going to learn them one way or another. So that's what we're seeing a lot of is people are learning those lessons the hard way, and they're surprised.
I call that statistic. I think it was the last episode, which I think is hilarious. And the statistic is, you know, like 99% of startups fail, and like 2 to 4% or whatever of acquired businesses fail in the next, whatever the year period is, 5 to 10 years or whatever it is. And I just think it's such a hilarious statistic for multiple reasons. First of all, like it's not like there's just those two options. So you're telling everybody start your own business or buy a business, but those aren't the two options. Those are just two things. And also the people who are buying businesses for millions of dollars might know a thing or two about business, thus reducing the failure rate. There's just so many factors that come into play that just make it funny. And I do not appreciate people like selling the idea of M&A. I didn't even want to get into M&A when I was in law school. I wanted to be a litigator. And I got stuck in it. That was the only job I could get was in finance and M&A because I was working in Japan. And you can't be an American litigator in a foreign country. You're not going to get that job. There was like one job open in the whole country that year to be a litigator. I got like near the end of the interview process, and they were like, can you draft full briefings in Japanese? And I am fluent in Japanese now, but I wasn't then. And I was like, no, what the fuck are you talking about? And they were like, get them out of here. And so I got stuck in M&A, didn't want to do it, but I had to read dozens of books and learn so much just to even understand what the hell was going on. And now people are like, oh, M&A is the easy thing. I'm like, who the fuck are you? Get out of here. You know, I don't know. I do not appreciate it at all. I do like people learning about new things and learning ways to like invest their money. Like, oh, maybe you should put your money into business. I'm totally in agreement with a lot of those type of statements, but yeah. And this conversation has been awesome. I definitely really appreciated your time here today, Ryan.
No problem. Yeah, this was fun. We went a less specific tactical M&A-esque route, perhaps, but maybe that could be refreshing for some people.
Yeah, I think that in SaaS, though, there's a lot of this blend between founder stories to like just SaaS shit and then M&A stuff. That's kind of how we're doing the conversations. So we want it, first and foremost, we want it to be conversational, and I think we hit that nail right on the head.
Yeah. Yeah, Ryan, to round out this conversation, thanks so much for joining us on this week's episode. Do you have a tip of the day that you can share?
My tip is to be greedy with your personal contribution, but not with the valuations or the outcomes of that contribution.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, everyone, thanks for tuning in for another week of the SaaS Buyers Club. I'm your host, Omeed.
And I'm your co-host, Joe.
Thank you both for having me.
Okay, yeah, and,
Awesome.
and thank you for joining us, Ryan. We really appreciate all your insights and your time and shooting the shit with you.
Yeah, this was a pleasure. Check me out on x.com/Ryan C. Kulp, where I shitpost, or you can read my blogs about marketing, entrepreneurship at ryanckulp.com.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for tuning in. See you next week.